right. Hello, hello. We're live. We're live. Huzzah. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is my first time doing a guest stream. So this is my first time with this particular technical setup. So I just want to make sure that everything is good. Hey Game Masters, how are you doing?
Ichi, how are you?
Oh, good. So far audio levels look good. So you guys let me know if there are any issues with the audio levels or any such thing. Yes, hello Seraphis, hello Grim Squirrel. Game Masters also has the chat up there, so he should be able to see you guys as well. Hello Galaxy. How are you guys? How is everybody? I have a cat on my lap. If anyone's wondering why I'm making strange movements with my arm, it's because I'm actually petting my cat down here. She's all potatoed. She's not doing so hot. I think her steroids running out, so we're gonna have to take her into the vet to get her next shot. But
yeah, we've got a dog that's in a very similar state.
Oh,
she's not doing good either. Yeah.
Yeah. How old is she?
That's what happens. We think she's about 15, maybe 16 years old. We got her as a rescue, so yeah, we're not 100% sure how old she is, but
yeah, that's same story. We think she was 2 years old when we got her, and yeah, just guessing about 14, 15. So when they reach that age. Hi, Galaxy Fox. All right, so yeah, so I'll go ahead and jump into the start of the whole thing. And the main reason why I wanted to do this is because I had a sort of errant thought / theory, and I wanted to invite you to come along and just chat with me about it and get your thoughts on it, and we'll see kind of where the discussion takes us. But it involves D&D and technology. So for anyone catching this after the fact or anyone in chat who doesn't know, Game Masters actually did a live stream about D&D and AI a while back. I think that was April, so a couple of months ago. But what I'm focused on is not the AI part of it. I feel like that's a topic that's been kind of done to death at this point and will continue to be done because it's so new. But I had this thought that technology, not in terms of AI, but in terms of YouTube, Reddit, gathering places of information, the sort of digital library of D&D, is slowly eroding the individuality of D&D tables. I was wondering if perhaps, especially since I'm a kind of younger DM, I was wondering if maybe in the earlier days of D&D, it was more commonplace to have tables be more different from each other. Whereas now we have all of these places where people go, they just go onto YouTube and they type, how to be a DM, and they get all these hits on how to be a DM. And not saying that those videos don't have variety, but I just get this weird suspicion that people, especially tables where the DM and the players are new, that there's not a whole lot of difference between this table and that table and that table. It's almost like we're all trying to play the same game. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that and your experience with that, if you had any.
Yeah, so I guess the way I kind of look at it, so, the game itself came out in the 70s, was a big hit in the 80s, right? And that's when I started playing, was in the late 80s. So take a look at movies, for example. I'm sure you've probably seen some movies that took place or that were made, in the 1950s, 1960s, but probably not a lot. No, I haven't. The majority of the movies that I've watched were actually shot, filmed, and released in the 70s and 80s. And I also wonder, too, the way I kind of see technology, what it's done for the industry, I don't think it's had as much of an impact on the table as time has. And so what I mean by the movie allegory there is, if you take a look at D&D today, how many people are actually like newer players? How many newer players are going back to the older versions of the game? Likewise, when movies were new to me, how many times did I go back and watch an older movie? Very rarely. I knew they were there. I knew movies existed before, I got into them. I just didn't really care about movies back then. So I kind of see that more as the connection and correlation of the game itself, D&D itself. How many players are going back to look at the older versions of, or the older edition of the game versus, well, we just have this new stuff and that's what we like. Yeah, sure, we know that there's older games out there, older versions of it, but old stuff, that's what my dad used to play. That's what my granddad used to play in this new stuff. And I know that there are some YouTubers out there that do highlight the older editions, but you have to really search for that. If you look up how to be a good DM, good chances that you're not going to find a channel or even a video that's specifically talking about how to be a DM from a second edition point of view.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily state that it's technology that's detracting from it, as it is just human evolution, just or just the evolution of things. You could take a look and I use the allegory of a movie. Look at any other books out there. Are there, like in the 1970s, noir books were majorly big, super big. The detective crime novel. Don't see that much these days. I think they're cool, but you just don't see that much in today's modern library. And so, that's how I see that connection is more, it's a more modern audience and they're just not really looking at things in the past. So, it's, I don't know, kind of that lore has been forgotten, so to speak.
It's interesting that you bring up the, let me just fix this here. It's interesting that you bring up the detective novels or the noir portion of that, because what immediately jumps to my brain is like Glass Onions and the movie that preceded it that was kind of, and it makes me wonder if, when you talk about movies,
Knife Out,
yeah, if you talk about movies, that makes me think of, okay, styles, fads,
right.
All of those come back around. Almost every person I've ever, so that almost makes me wonder if we're maybe seeing that, if we will see that or are seeing that, because obviously the OGL prompted a lot of exploration in the TTRPG space, that it was certainly a catalyst, not that they didn't exist before, but it was a big highlighter to that whole thing. So it almost makes me wonder if we'll see that again. So I guess my next follow-up question to that, so you don't really think technology is what it is, or access to that information per se. You think it's just the fact that there's newer editions, the newer one is always going to have the shinier coat of paint, so to speak.
But I would say too that I think technology certainly has a hand in it. I wouldn't say that that's the driving force behind it.
Okay.
It's the same thing, like, with special effects nowadays versus, special effects from, I don't know, watch Nosferatu, for example. I don't know if you've seen that one or not, but the old black and white original one that came out years before I was born, silent film. And just look at that technological difference. It's still a great film by standards, its own right, but it's wildly different than what we could achieve today with today's technology and film. And I think if anything, today's technology has certainly given a grander access to the game. and this is for any role-playing game out there. You know, it's. I just think that technology has added a better connection. Um, I mean, you know, you go back 10 years, 15 years. You know, you and me have been in several different live streams with other YouTube creators
Mm.
that span globally. You know, we've been in live streams with people from the UK, with folks from Australia, Canada, different parts of the United States. And, you know, 20 years ago, while that was possible, it was not as readily available as it is today. And I think in that instance, I don't know that technology is necessarily a bad thing for the game. I think that helps bring players together for sure. But to what you were saying about it, you know, it is incredibly easy for somebody to just jump into YouTube, type up, be a good DM, and they'll probably get the advice from the channels that have, you know, 300,000 plus subscribers.
Right.
You know, they're
The
very
larger.
rarely going to run across. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
and those are not to knock them. I mean, you know, there's some good channels out there for sure, but if that's all anybody is looking at, there's a whole wider world of how to DM out there, and anything, I would almost say that technology has given too much of a choice. I'm big with allegories. I'm big with painting pictures with other scenarios. So this is the best example I can give you. The grocery store. Look at the mustard. You know, go to Walmart, your local Walmart. Look at the mustard. Look at how many different choices of mustard you have. Of honey mustard, spicy mustard, brown mustard, mustard
Yeah.
with
Dijon
sriracha
mustard
sauce in it,
and great.
Dijon mustard. You know,
Yeah. And then off
I
brand
mean,
and
I
then
could.
on brand and then the
Right, right,
yeah.
right. So that's, you know, it's too much choice. It's almost, some people like a variety and a choice of different things. Sometimes too much of a choice is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think when you have how to be a good DM and you get, I'll tell you what, why don't I'll take a look at this. Because I'm genuinely curious.
That's
To be a good DM.
perfect timing. I'm seeing some people in the chat mention choppiness and that they're having issues. And so while you're looking that up, I want to. Now I'm seeing other responses here, so some of what we're saying is getting out, but there is definitely a issue going on. The only kicker, guys, is I'm not 100% sure what I can do about it because the setup that I have is very, it's 1-to-1 to 1-to-1. It may not be the best tech setup ever, but there's a possibility that we're just struggling a little bit with that. Let's see how it goes. Let's keep going a little bit, but if I get more people talking about technical issues, I may have to wrap up and try a round 2 with different setup.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. It's interesting. So yeah, we'll go for a little bit longer. So you said, so when you pull up how to be a good DM, how many results do you get? I'm gonna guess like somewhere like I'm gonna guess 1,200 to 1,500.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you have that many that pop up, where do you start? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the first one, second one, you know, that's fine, but still, that's a lot to choose from. I mean, imagine if you walked into Walmart and there were 12,000 mustard selections.
You know, it's funny
You know,
because Fat Electrician, who I do actually like, did a video recently talking about Costco, and he has a bit in the middle of it that's it's meant to be funny, but it's actually kind of on point, of how people think they like choice, but they don't actually like choice. And he says, and he talks about Costco and them having too many choices, and how people they want more options, but like they actually don't, but they don't know that, you know. So people will opt for more options. But because I can tell you, I have that issue when it comes to just the fitness, just trying to get into shape, trying to lose weight. And the amount of information available, and even people within the fitness industry will tell you this, the amount of information available is just too much. It's just too much information. And you never, and it's conflicting information.
Sure.
So, and then I also am wondering about the concept of the algorithm, though. So on top of all of that information that you have the algorithm, and you just said yourself, and I was thinking the exact same thing, that the top channels, you know, in the D&D community tend to have a lot of similarities between them, because those channels are either catering to the algorithm, not throwing shade. I mean, it's what you do if you want to be successful, truly. So they're either trying to feed into the algorithm, or this is what the algorithm has drummed up, but you get this sort of similarity between them. And so part of me wonders if that, you know, it's not just the amount of information, but also like how that information is being presented to you. Now, I have this fantasy, if you will, in my head of that in the early days of D&D, you didn't have that. You know, you learned D&D from like your friend down the street who told you about it in person and, hey, come play at my table. And you guys had this rule book. So if you read the rules and interpreted it this way, well, that's just the way you played, because there was no YouTube or library or place where you could go and be like, oh, shoot, I've been doing that wrong this whole time. You just kept doing it that way.
Yep.
So is that true? Is that how that was?
That's exactly how it went. I mean, our main go-to resource was, so I grew up in Memphis. That's where that's where I learned to play, was living in Memphis, and had access to 2 or 3 different stores that we could buy the books at.
Gaming stores.
Yeah. Oh, it was awesome. It was great, you know. But that was our go-to, was either a friend's older brother who was into the game, and that's how I got into it. Was a buddy of mine was staying the night over at his house, and his older brother was there and said, hey, you guys come check this out. Okay, so we checked it out, rolled up some characters. Within 10 minutes, I'm delving into a dungeon, opening up a chest. He says, hand me your character sheet. Okay. Why?
That's never a good sign.
You died. And he goes, you died. And keep in mind, this is me, I mean, literally 10 minutes into ever playing the game for the first time. I said, well, how did I die? And he goes, you have no idea, you're dead. And I've been in love with the game ever since. But it's
so different from 5e. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So our resource was, or my resource was him, my buddy's older brother. By the time I got around to being the DM, the forever DM, was going to the old guy that had the long beard and the long hair that ran the shop that I would buy the books from, and I would say, so here's the situation. I've got this character, this character, this character, this character, and these 2 characters want to go this way, these 2 characters want to go this way. How do I deal with that? And he would explain, you know, this is what you do. You know, if you need to take one person up from the table, go into the hallway or bathroom and talk to them private, give them a message, and let them have that information. That was the issue I was trying to come up with, was how do I share, you know, if the group splits up, how do I share information with these 2 people and not these
not
2
the
people?
Others?
Right. It never occurred to me that we could get up from the table and go into a separate room to talk. The thought was not there. And so, I mean, it was little things like that the owners of these stores were, they were our YouTube at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting that you tell that story about that guy, because I'm thinking with the note that I wrote down, like kind of writing as we go, because brain, human to human element. So you're not just because, and this might be a bit of a sidetrack, but hey, that's okay. We're all about, I only have so many questions prepared. I was hoping sidetracks would happen.
Yeah.
So a sidetrack of that, it occurred to me, so I have about 800 some odd subs right now, which is way nothing compared to you and a lot of other channels that I know. But what's really interesting about that number is I look at it and I go, oh, 800 subscribers, I'm doing really, I mean, that's amazing compared to where I was before DC20, by the way. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I noticed.
Seraphis called that out. Thank you. I have 2 shirts and a hoodie. They are ridiculously comfy. But I'm almost terrified to wash them because of the texture of the print on them. But this is my favorite one, and it's all backwards on there, I think. But it says because I set the DC, that's why. And since I'm a forever DM, I figured that was perfect for me. Yeah. So there you go.
It is good.
I like this one. This is like my favorite shirt of the different shirts that they had. But anyways, so at where I live, 10 years ago, there were maybe 3 restaurants in the whole town. I mean, it's compared to where most of you live, it's like, you know, a speck on the map. Now because I've lived here for 20 years, having all these new restaurants and having all of this construction done, I mean, there's an area of town that when I went to school was nothing but dirt, and now is an entire shopping amalgamation thing like the size of blocks. It was all dirt when I went to school. It's crazy how fast that happened. But one of the things in that new development is a new baseball stadium, which was terrifying to most of the locals, but I do like baseball. And it's a minor league. Some uber wealthy guy moved here from out of state, bought a chunk of land, built a baseball stadium. Yay.
Build it and they will come, and they did, yeah.
And and I mean, people were kind of already here before that, but now they just have something to do. I have a love-hate relationship with that stadium because as a longtime local, I'm like, go away, quit moving here. But at the same time, I really like baseball, and I'm not going to lie, having a venue that's family-oriented, that's, you know, where you feel safe and it's good to be, it is good, and I do enjoy it. But anyways, all that to say, that said stadium, being minor league, you know, it's kind of like miniature. I've been to Busch Stadium in St. Louis. It's where my grandparents are from. It's where my family's from, St. Louis. And going to Busch Stadium and then going to this stadium, so when I say stadium, I don't mean like what big city people are probably thinking of. But even still, said stadium can host, 10,000 people, I think or maybe it wasn't quite 10,000. Maybe it's a little under that. But if you picture 800 people sitting in that, you know, the number totally changes when you change your perspective. I look at 800 and I'm like, man, I haven't even reached 1K. I can't even monetize yet. I'm so tiny. And then I picture myself standing in that stadium staring at 800 people, and it's like, holy crap.
Oh, wow.
So it speaks to me of difference between your interaction with the guy at that game store and your older brother, and sitting at a table with 3 other people, and you're like, what's this? And they're like, oh, let me introduce you to this game. Like that experience versus these YouTube videos, because they're blasted out there. You know, think about how many 300,000 people really are. And then subscribers versus even just views. Granted, most people don't watch. I mean, I think my average watch time on my videos is like 10 minutes, and most of my videos are hours long because they're mostly streams. So, but even still, I feel like there's something there to the way that information is presented to people that's so different to the experience, like what you talked about. I mean, when I first learned to play, it was 2007, something like that. So Wizards had already bought, so no TSR. I knew nothing about it. I didn't know what D&D was, other than the fact that it was some game my dad played when I was a toddler. And I thought it was cool because they had dice, and I thought dice were cool. Because of how I lived and where I lived, I completely bypassed social media. Like, I still don't have social media accounts to this day other than YouTube. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago that I even found like Ginny D and D Shorts and all those guys. Like, I never watched a video. My majority of my DMing experience completely on my own. I had myself, my books, and my players, and that's it. Yeah. And I think that experience is what inspired me to want to even chit chat about this, because I feel like that's an experience people should have. Like I'm a little bit, it's really nice having access to all the information, but I'm a little bit like, I feel like we're losing something.
Yeah, I mean, if that's all you do is jump on and watch videos, I don't know that you're losing anything necessarily. I think that it's a wildly different approach. But I have always been a very, I'm not going to say social because I'm very antisocial, believe it or not. I don't like, I like staying at home. I don't like getting out and talking to people. But when I get in front of a camera and a microphone is in my face, I don't know how to shut up. And
I'm with you. I'm
it's
with you so much.
yeah, it's really weird because I mean it's like it's complete opposite of who I am in real life. In real life, I'm very quiet. I sit back. I mean, I still say what's on my mind, and I'll still call something out. Honestly, I'm surprised I haven't been fired at work yet because of it, but it's a totally different story. But I mean, I stand up for myself, and
Yeah.
and I'm not going to let people walk all over me. But getting out here, initially when I started my channel, I was not. I didn't know that that's what you were supposed to do is interact with the commenters, people making comments.
Oh.
I didn't know that you could have a banter back and forth and build a rapport with members or people chatting. And certainly didn't know that you could do live streams. Of course, I mean, I've been on YouTube for a number of years, but it wasn't really till last year that I started getting kind of into doing live streams. And I think for a new player, that's going to be your best resource. I in this sense, I'm going to kind of reverse a touch on what I was saying earlier. I think that YouTube specifically can be a great resource of technology for D&D, because so me growing up, I was big into reading Stephen King. I was big into watching, movies like Aliens and Star Wars even. And with social media, you can now actually reach out and you can have a conversation with Emil. You can have a conversation with Stephen King and they'll respond back to you. And, in my day and age, that didn't happen. There was,
Right.
because there was no way to reach them. There was no way to contact them unless it was like through their
Say like fan
just
mail,
or
kind
something.
of like isn't
Yeah,
there like a thing where like celebrities or people of that status had like buckets and buckets of letters? But I mean,
yeah,
sitting down and going clickety clickety click is a lot easier and a lot faster
sure,
than
sure,
manually opening up and then
right.
goodness knows writing a
Well, and half the
response.
time, yeah, and half the time when you did send a letter, you'd get a canned response that wasn't actually from the person that you just wrote.
Just
It's from
mass
somebody that they've
printed.
delegated. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, if anything, I think that that's probably one of the coolest aspects of the technology is that if somebody finds a creator that they really like, that, hey, her style, I like the way she plays the game, I like the way she runs the game, and I like the advice she has, I would highly recommend to any newer player, connect with them, talk to them.
Mm.
That's the best way to learn the game, is to talk with people that have played the game.
It's kind of a hobby that's really kind of by the people for the people, wouldn't you say? Just
Yeah,
TTRPGs in
yeah,
general.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's it's funny. So just to swap back over to chat a little bit here, saying hello to Swordplay and Sorcery, who's currently driving to Gen Con, which I forgot was happening, but should have remembered.
Yeah,
So for those of us who couldn't go to Gen Con, we're sitting here in front of our cameras at home with cats on our lap. Of which, yes, somebody spotted that is Mercury on my lap. So I want to go back. I'm actually going to go back in time here a little bit because there are some people typing all kinds of things. Let's see. Too much choice is overwhelming. Agreed. Let's see. Grim Squirrel. I think my brain. I think they do that with a lot of things nowadays, especially like how many times you've been out and seen someone wearing the same clothes as you. I think Grimscroll was talking about what I was talking about with the algorithm, about how it tends to feed you similar things. One more notice of the stream being choppy, but not too many. I do apologize if it's a bit choppy. My internet has its limits, unfortunately. If I ever do this again, I'll have a smarter, better way of doing it. I'll put it that way. Let's see. My first experience with RP games was GURPS in the 80s. When I was in grade school, a buddy of mine loved it and then got involved with AD&D when my babysitter in the 80s introduced it to me. Someone who's interested in TTRPGs but is antisocial. You know, it's funny, Cableman, that you mentioned that. If I had $1 for every time I've heard a streamer or a TTRPGer say, actually, I'm an introvert, particularly in their videos, I wouldn't have to work anymore. I mean, it's a social hobby. Video gaming doesn't really require you to be social. A lot of introverts play video games. What is it about TTRPGs that makes it to where so many introverts and neurodivergent people are attracted to it, but it's a social experience?
It is. So I'll specifically refer to Cableman's comment here, because I am extraordinarily antisocial. You know, that's kind of what I guess that's the word that I was not able to come up with just a few minutes ago. But being on YouTube allows me to still be antisocial, but social at the same time. It's really weird.
It's true.
I don't know. I don't know that I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's anxiety being in front of people, but being in a large crowd freaks me out. I don't like it. Going to parties where there's loud music and people are just milling around for no reason, I can't stand it. Oh, that just creeps me out. I can't handle it. But put me on a panel with, 15 other people that are, all talking on YouTube. Cool. I can participate in that, because I can either be as quiet as I need to be or vocal as I need to be.
Do you think that it has something to do with the whole captive audience concept? I believe it was Cantrip who was talking to me about this. And I cannot remember for the life of me exactly what he said. He, she, they. I don't know them, but what they said, because I mean it was like this long in the Discord. There was this whole thing. But they talked about how streaming isn't really getting to know people or relationship with people, because you're just talking and they're chatting at you, but you're not seeing another human being. You don't actually really know them. It's not truly. I can't remember what he said, but he had a point about it. And I don't. What do you think that the whole idea that it's not actually people and they can't, like, you can just keep talking, they can't interrupt you or anything. Do you think that plays a role in it?
I would have to say that my view on that is kind of 50-50.
Oh.
I think that if it's just a drive-by, I'm just going to join the live stream and talk for 20 minutes and then that's it, and never talk to that person again. Yeah, 100%. That's the correct way to look at that. It's not people, at that point. It's just a talking head. But I think that if you find a core group, and I think that a lot of us, some of the folks in the chat, me, you, we have all participated in multiple chats, multiple live streams with other creators. And I think if that is established and that is maintained, let's say you and I, and I know Bear, that you've been on some of his chats, Seraphis has been in some of our chats or live streams. And I think that if we continue that with those same people, add new people in, some people are going to leave, that's just going to happen. But over the course of a year, 2 years, at a certain point, no, those are no longer just strangers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
It just takes time. It's like with any other kind of relationship out there. It's You know, you're not going to just find somebody randomly on the street and strike up a conversation and immediately know the person backwards and forwards. And I think that kind of how this works too. It's just the difference is we're not in the same room physically. You know?
Yeah, although people in the what there's it's almost like a saying now. It's been said so many times. What is it? Where, 10 no, that's the 10% of what you say. And I'm getting my lines mixed up, but basically it's the whole body language thing. The fact that because there's not, I've heard people kind of argue with me about this, where if someone's not in the room with you, it's entirely different than, being in a chat, in a video chat, or being in a on the phone with someone, especially where you can't see them. That there's a missing piece of the puzzle, and some people would. I feel like some people might say, oh, well, if you're video chatting, then it's no different. And then other people would argue against that and be, no, it's entirely different. Do you have like thoughts on that?
Again, I kind of see both sides. I agree. I mean, I think that it would be difficult for me to drop into an intimate, and I don't mean like in a sexual manner, but just in an intimate conversation with somebody. This, I just don't see that developing. But if I am, let's say, I'll use, me, you, Bear, Seraphis,
Kind of our own little circle of, we're all kind of orbiting around each other.
Yeah, gaming with ADHD. If the six of us were in a room together, I know that our live streams usually last 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes an hour and a half or so. But if you put the six of us in a room together, I mean, we'd probably stay up all night chatting.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I mean, yes, I do. I definitely see that there is a difference between being in person versus, live streaming like this. But I think it also depends on the individual. It's what they get out of it versus what they put into it.
Also, maybe expectations, because I think a lot of us, especially of the orbits that you just mentioned, I'll call them orbits, but like me, you, Bear, Seraphis, that we're aware of what we're getting into and what we're trying to maintain. Because like I would want to maintain a professional friendship. It was like, so like I now have, so there's but a couple of people in my chat, of which we have one spot left open. So I have 3 players, but basically me, Galaxy Fox, oh my gosh, my brain, I'm so sorry guys, me, Galaxy, George, Green Pea George in the chat here, and Grumpy, there it is. We're all doing a DC 20 game now. These are people who not only live halfway across the world from me, but are like, and when we were in the actual chat with each other, not on stream or anything, they videoed in for a few minutes just so like we could all see each other's faces. And I mean, that is certainly not meaningless. It might not be the same as a full-on like friendship in real life, but that right. Like and Galaxy is regularly, Galaxy, Seraphis, Grumpy, Aegis, whom I've also seen in there, Grim Squirrel, like they're regularly in my chats pretty much every Saturday. So it's kind of like, I talk with them, I learn things about them. Gods is another one, actually. I really like Gods, because I don't know why, but his videos just crack me up, and I'll play them for Steve and he'll just sit there with a straight face like he doesn't get it, and I'm just sitting there chuckling and laughing, and to each their own, I guess. Somebody mentioned, we were talking about why it is that introverts are so attracted to D&D. Oh, it was Galaxy, and her theory is that D&D is a game that you have the mindset that it is, and thus it feels safe, or better faced less consequences. I'm not sure I'm following the sentence structure there, but the idea that as introverts, we love D&D and we're okay with it because it's a safe place, you know, or it's an expected, like, we know what we're walking into, like what you mentioned with parties or large crowds. I hate that because I feel like it's chaos. You know, I don't like large gatherings because there's noise, there's visual. I'm a little bit deer in the headlights. I just kind of, and I don't know what to do. And it's just, there's just too much. But D&D is a small group of people. I think even introverts have, like, you know, if you just set them down with like 2 or 3 people, they're golden. Because as humans, we need social interaction. We really do. I'll see. I'm just catching up on chat here. Yep, when Grim Squirrel saying that when they're with people that they're comfortable with, they can talk their ear off, but otherwise mostly quiet and keep to themselves. Lots of people say that communication is at least 60 to 70% nonverbal, so it's probably different on a webcam. I would say, and there's Bear. There's Bear. I saw you earlier, Bear, but I didn't want to interrupt, so I didn't get a chance to say hi. But thanks for popping in. I'm glad that I didn't. I wanted to do like an open where I had me and you, and then I had like I could invite a couple of other people. But now I'm glad I didn't do that because it looks like my internet could not handle it, at least with this current setup. Speaking of goths, and he appears.
Goth in Rome, yeah, there you go.
Fancy that. I have powers. I didn't know I had powers. So. All right. Well, like I said, I had like a handful of questions kind of prepared, but I was hoping that there'd be lots of tangenting because I love talking with you because I feel like you have a perspective that I'm just not capable of having. I have a odd perspective. I'm a young DM, never experienced TSR, never experienced the 80s. 3.5 was my first edition. So in that respect, you have a very different perspective from me. Simultaneously, I don't really fall into the boat of newer DMs that just started, say, within the last year. And especially since I stayed out of social media and out of YouTube. So it's kind of one of those where I land in this awkward spot in the middle, kind of.
You kind of get a little bit of both, you know, both worlds, you know, because you didn't reach out in the beginning to social media to learn everything, so you kind of get that aspect of how, you know, how it was for me in the beginning, but you also and like me too now is, you know, you do have access to the YouTube channels and whatnot. And hey, listen, I've been doing this since, like I said, the 1980s, and even watching, you know, I mean, I still learn stuff from watching newer DMs, you know, people that have created a YouTube channel in the past two or 3 years, and they push out content, and I'm learning interesting, neat things from them and how they do things in their game.
Because that perspective can be different, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a neat thing. I think that above all technology and Dungeons and Dragons, I think that's probably the coolest thing, is that information is out there, but you have to know what you want to look for, but not be afraid to stumble down the rabbit hole you're looking, because there's all kinds of neat nooks and crannies in that exploration process. True.
You what you said there about new DMs and their perspectives, that, you know, my favorite of any type of player, because there's like different types of players, complete newbies. I love players at my table, and I've had kind of a lot actually, who've never played D&D before, because they will get outside of the books. They get outside the character sheet and they just do the most creative, inventive things. You know, I had one gal who, like, they were in a library, they were trapped, and there were reoccurring zombies. They had to figure out how to get out of the room. It's like the room filling up with sand while the room was filling up with zombies. And she like crawled on top of a bookcase, and she had a whip, and she's like, can I use my whip? And then can I like throw it so it wraps around his neck? And then can I pull him up and then kick him with it? And I'm like, and all of my other players at the table were like, I hit it with my sword. I shoot my bow. Like that was it. And it's like, man, and you guys are supposed to be the experienced ones.
Right.
I wonder why that is. I wonder why. So I have another topic idea that popped up, so I'll circle that for potentially leather. But do you what are your thoughts on your experience with new players, and why do you think it is that that's such a universal thing? I've heard a lot of other DMs say that exact same thing. Why does that keep happening?
I agree 100%. New players, they do think outside the box and outside of the books. I like the new players specifically for that reason, because it does keep me on my toes, and it's like it's a reminder to myself of, wow, yeah, that got really creative. That's kind of cool. So I think I'm going to let them run with that. And that, honestly, I think that's part of the basis for a lot of the homebrew stuff that I come up with is I'm a big factor of the rule of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And newer players have a tendency, because they don't know, they don't know that certain things aren't supposed to be able to happen as per the rules. It's just kind of too cool. And I like the cinematic, how should I put it? I like the cinematic of the mind that what they're wanting to do pulled off in the way that they're kind of detailing it. So I'll run with it with a newer player. And older players are exactly what you said. I hit it with my sword.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, guys. Get a little more creative than that.
I am secretly hoping that my new DC 20 group will give me a different experience. I'm not gonna lie, my current group, even though one of them is newer, and actually two of them are newer, one's newer than the other newer one, if that makes sense, and then the other two are kind of more the experienced ones. And I have this like fantasy in my head that my new DC 20 group will have like these really creative people in it, and then I can pull one of my players from the in-person game and stick it in that game to like give them a new experience and kind of expose them more to the creativity. Because they do have a tendency to, I mean, there's like actual awkward silences at the table sometimes, and as a DM a lot of the advice you're given is to talk less, which I like support. Like, yes, DMs talk less, but I end up talking so much because like it just, everyone goes quiet and they just look at me and I'm like, so what would you like to do? And I'm like, I guess we go this way. And I'm like, do you want to? Do you know, and then I try to do this thing. I have like a rule of 3. So like big cities, right? Which I think the DMs have had problems with. Big, what do you do? Because it's too open. There's too much. So when I have them enter a city, I usually describe it in such a way that alludes to its largeness. But then I also will point out, like you see a tavern over here and you see a blacksmith over here, it looks like this, and you see this building over here and it looks like this. And I try to have a minimum of 3 specific things that they could interact with or that might draw their attention so that they can, but even then sometimes it's like and then I'm thinking to myself, am I a terrible DM? Like, what's going on?
So you've described a tavern, a blacksmith, and an inn. I mean,
say
an
a
item
shop. Yeah.
Yeah. And they decide, is there a wishing well around here? Can we drop down into the sewers?
I don't even get that sometimes. I don't even, I wish I had that. I have had sessions, and of course some sessions are different than others, but I have had sessions where they're like, okay. And they all look at each other and they go, what do you want to do? And I go, well, I mean, what do you want to do? Like you could look at your weapons, you could rest up. I mean, my particular in-person group is very, very like skip cutscene, skip cutscene, skip cutscene. And so it's kind of like, as a DM, I've only ever done in-person games. That's the other thing too. I keep hearing about this DM crisis and I'm sitting over here like, I'll DM for you. I just want people to show up. Because I have had so many groups where that's a thing, but I've been too nervous to do online gaming until recently.
I'm not a fan of online gaming. I'm just not a fan of it.
But what about, like, you personally, you're not, and I'm with you, because again, I've only ever done in-person games, but what about the concept of reach, though? Because, like, in my local area...
Love that. Yeah. No, I love the concept of reach. I mean, and I don't think that there would, I think jumping online, I don't think that there would ever be a shortage of players. And I have played some online games before. The biggest issue that I have is minutes into it, somebody's dog starts barking.
Oh,
30
yeah.
minutes into it, someone gets up to use the bathroom and they're gone for 20 minutes. An hour into it, and the spouse comes home, and so they carry on a conversation with somebody that's over here without muting their microphone. But hey, how are you doing? Did you buy the loaf of bread? What are we doing for dinner? Are you fish sticks okay with you? Did you get ketchup? And guys, mute your microphone or something. And it's any distractions. I don't like it.
It's I would go out on a limb to say that there can be some disrespectful behavior.
Yes.
Because so there's, in fact, here's another topic. See, I'm thinking of topics as we go, which I was hoping was going to happen. So one topic, I'm just going to say this. If we don't get to it, that's fine, but at least I threw it out there. But DMing as a craft. So I'm going to put that pin in that. And then I saw something, behind every face is a story. Experienced players fall into the ruts of what's expected. We know what to do and how to do it. New players don't, so they're trying everything. That's why a flat no is a bad thing. Yeah, in my little small corner of the internet, I'd like to put into the universe for experienced players to think more like newbie players.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah, on behalf of DMs everywhere who are with me, like if you're an experienced player and you catch it, like pay attention too, because I think my players don't realize they're doing it. Like as what Aegis said there about what's expected. They fall into the trap of what's expected. So if you're a player right now, to anyone who's watching this now or after, if you're a player right now, pay attention the next time you're in your game and watch if you're doing that and see, because there are way too many DMs who are with me on their love of new players, for sure. Try to strangle him. Let's grapple, catching up here a little bit. New players don't know the rules, and all they hear is you can do anything you want. And more experienced players don't want to break the rules or make it harder on the DM. Be prepared. The tether kid in me shall be released. Tether?
So what Galaxy says there, Galaxy Fox, that more experienced players don't want to break the rules or make it harder on the DM. I can kind of understand that. Because I know, and I've seen my fair share of DMs that are very much rules as written,
Okay.
They're not flexible, and they take the mentality of that it's the DM versus the players. And I'm definitely not that, but I have seen and heard plenty of DMs out there that are exactly that. And know that there's a single fix for that other than, hey players, that's not how it has to be.
Yeah.
Especially if you are playing online. There are DMs aplenty out there. I feel bad for anybody that runs across a DM that is that much of a tyrant that they have the freedom of being able to play creatively.
I just I unfortunately I missed the last couple of 5 words you said, because I just noticed this chat that Aegis said there of the last thing any DM would ever want to ask me is, what do you want to do? I will totally go off the wall. But see, Aegis, I need that, because the game that I have now is yeah, like you say it like a bad thing, but man, and it's not even just the group I have now. I mean, as a DM in general, I've experienced this where, in fact, when I first started the campaign with the group I have now, but that would have been a while ago. But when I very first started that, I didn't know them. I had not I knew them personally, but I had not known them as players. And I didn't know what their style was. And then the other one who I have played with before, we took a year-long break in between. We hadn't done D&D in forever. So this is our first game in 1 to 2 years. And I sit down, and the setup was they were all sitting in a tavern. They were all part of an adventuring company. And every single time I prep for a session, I have a funny little title for all of my sessions have like these funny little titles, and the title for this one was "Congratulations, you're fired." And so the whole start of the session and the campaign was they were in a tavern, they had just finished a job, and they just found out they were fired. So they're sitting around like, you just lost your job. And I wanted them to role play, talk to each other, interact, give me some sort of clue of what you want. Do you want to pursue being a thieves guild? Do you want to become evil? Do you want to start your own adventuring company? Do you want to go out to the quest board outside? I even told them there was a quest board outside. But legitimately after that, not only was there lots of awkward silence while I tried to figure something out for them, but I got complaints afterward that it was too open. I was like, I mean, kind of by design, because I was fishing, because I wanted to know, but I have gotten lots of complaints about being too open in my games.
See, I mean, I guess my style of DMing is, I don't care how much I've prepared. At the beginning, when I was originally running, you know, I was preparing full-on modules, you know, type styled adventures. But the years, it's kind of become more of a, I've got a general idea, and I prepare less and less at every session, because I really do encourage my players to think outside the box. And I'm just there to kind of keep track of what's happening. They're there to create the story. And I explain that to them, you know, when they first start sitting down to play. That's how I describe it to them is, guys, I know the planet, I know the world, and I know everything that's happening in it, but you are here to create the story. So if you think of something, don't be shy. Talk about it, you know, start talking about it, and I can incorporate that into your picture.
It's kind of like... It's kind of like in my very first stick figure video, I equated being a DM to being like your PlayStation or your Xbox, insofar as if you sit there on the couch with a controller and you're like this, and you never touch the sticks, and you never hit any of the buttons, you're just going to be staring at a static screen. Like the DM just reacts to things. That's kind of what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's a little more to it. I mean, yes, obviously, you know, I have to have a preconceived notion of some form of direction. You know, like I have to know that at some point there's going to be a red dragon that they fight. How they get to it is up to them. May not know that there's going to be a red dragon that they're going to fight, but, you know, I mean, I got to have a couple of tricks up my sleeve. You know, otherwise it's just not very fun for anybody. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, they get to dictate to me, they do where they go, and they know that, you know. That's not to say that every session is that way. I mean, some nights we just have a pure, flat-out hack and slash. Hey, guys, here's a dungeon. There's an entrance. You go in. There's probably going to be some monsters in there, and they know at that point, I don't have anything prepared, and you know, there's very little role playing that's going to be happening. It's just, we're going to roll dice and have combat. And, you know, I mean, they're okay with that, because every now and again, you just have to let, you know, blow off some steam. And, you know, that's kind of fun, you know, I mean, just going in and just monsters, you know, looting monsters, gaining gold coins and finding magic items. Fun. But other times, and we have had sessions before where there has been absolutely zero combat. Nothing wrong with that either.
I like to keep a flip-flop or a pendulum swing of, so let's see, last session was, and we're about 4 sessions into DC 20, which were probably a true story. They should have leveled up probably twice by now, so, or at least one. Well, yeah, no, they would be approaching level 3 by now, so we're out leveling the beta content, that is to say. So we're going to probably end up dipping back into 5th edition, but what I ended up doing was just switching the system and continuing the story. There was no, I mean, it's the same character, they're just different numbers on a different sheet. Because to me, that's not that complicated. To me, that you just do that and it's not a big deal. But last one was fairly combat heavy. And the one before that, though, they went to a ball. They went to a gala. And there was just it was just a whole bunch of role play and talking to people. But since they just had that, the next session I deliberately was like, okay, they need to fight some things. So I try to back and forth and back and forth. Yeah. So one thing I mentioned earlier, and I'm trying not to completely ignore the chat, but I'm also trying to like, I don't want to be wasting your time, and I'm enjoying conversation. So, but one thing I put up here, and maybe I'm just completely crazy, I don't know, but DMing as a craft. So when I started, basically what happened is my at the time boyfriend said something about D&D, and I loved the Drist books. I was reading the Salvatore books, and he goes, oh, it's the game that those books are based off of. And I'm like, wait, what? And like, yeah, no, that it's actually a game. And then he just writes what happens in the game for his books with some flavor. And I was like, what? So he's like, okay, here we go. And he pulls out these books, and he's like, you're going to create a character. And I'm like, okay. So we went through character creation, which was like probably a good 2 hours. and then he sets me up in a fort, and I'm a ranger with a white wolf animal companion, which I don't think was technically by the rules, but he let me have it. And then he's like, okay, there's ghouls and orcs, and they're coming at you. And I'm like, I'm firing my bow. And it was so engaging. And my first roll ever was like an 18, which was a really good, nice, high place to start from. And then immediately after that, I put on the Lord of the Rings special features from the extended editions, where they have a lot of the history and the Tolkien and all of that. Yeah. And I just listened to that for like 3 days straight while I world built this whole world. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to run a game now. And I've basically been a DM ever since. So the way I figure it is, you know, there's the forever DMs who are only that way because no one else wants to DM. And then I feel like there's the DMs who are like me, where it's like, I don't even know that I would be happy playing, because people have told me that you can't DM unless you've been a player. And I'm like, well, I call BS on that. And because to me, the DMing itself is the craft, not just the TTRPG, but the actual being a DM is that's the engaging thing. That's the thing that I'm constantly striving to be better at. And what are your thoughts on that / where do you land?
Well, I mean, you know, I started out, I kind of told that story earlier. You know, it was a friend of mine's brother that got me into it. And I want to say that maybe I was a player for maybe 6 months. That was maybe one session a month before I got, you know, before I had saved up enough money to be able to buy my own books. And from that point forward, because here's the thing, my friend's brother, I mean, he was, you know, in college, we were in high school. He didn't have his drinking buddies around at that point, just kind of, you know, trying to entertain himself by showing us the game. We, at that point, really never played in his games at all because, you know, he was running it for his college friends. Us. And that's what made me ultimately end up trying to become a DM. And I don't think I had that much experience in playing a game. Now, I have played in games over the years, yes, but my primary function has always been the DM. I don't think I'd agree that you have to be a player in order to be a DM. I think there is a mindset that you have to have or to be a successful DM. I don't think that every single player out there has the capability of being a DM. I'm not trying to say that to be offensive to anybody. It's just there is a lot that goes into creating an adventure, and a lot that goes into creating a world. I think, now that said, I think anybody could pick up, you know, the modern 5th edition stuff. You know, take for example Phandelver and Below, you know, one of the newer adventures. I think anybody could pick that book up, player or seasoned DM, and run other people through it. I don't think that there's much of a ask to be a DM to be able to run that. But if you're going to homebrew, if you're going to go off the rails, if you're going to have players that and you will have players that do think outside the box. That's where, I don't know that another player necessarily has the knowledge behind them to roll with the punches, so to speak. Like, so, I mean, Fandelver and Below, I don't know if you're familiar with that adventure, but it takes place in one specific area in the realms, Forgotten Realms. What happens if, well, actually, what is one of your favorite 5th edition adventures?
So earlier when you said that you feel that anybody can pick up a module and run with that, but if you're going to go homebrew, and also specifically when you said you think it takes a specific mindset to do the world building and adventure building, it's not that I disagree necessarily, I just have a different take on that. Both of those. So the reality is I don't have a favorite adventure because I've only ever tried one module once ever. It was a complete disaster. I was miserable. The players were thankfully not so miserable, but I was absolutely miserable. And after that, I wrote it off and I said, nah, I'm not doing modules anymore. At best, I'm stealing art out of the book and maybe stat blocks, but I'm not, nope. And I have, there are a lot of people, and I was going to not necessarily get into this, but obviously there are a lot of people that are unhappy with WotC and do that whole thing where they're like, I'm never going to spend another dime there again, which I don't blame them. I'm not throwing shade, but Yep. But I haven't spent any money with them since 2014 because I have the 3 core rule books from 2014 and that's it. And I've gotten by successfully on nearly 15 years of DMing with just that. So I am not the person to talk to when it comes to the skills. Now, I will agree that there's a different, it's kind of like they say in kitchens that it takes a different person to be the chef versus plating. There's one guy we were watching and he said, I've seen people who are brilliant chefs, but they can't plate worth anything. Sure. I would say that to me, the world building and the adventure building is not like, I could do it in my sleep. I don't care. But what I think the skill set part of it is between the DM and the player is the at the table stuff. Is being able to do it at the table, because anybody can sit down there, or I feel like anyone has the potential to sit down there with a notebook and go like this for 3 hours and come up. People are creative; they'll come up with something.
Yeah.
So,
and that's not really what I refer to. What I'm referring to is, okay. So, so Fandelver. I mean, it takes place in one specific area. What do you do when a player decides, well, I want to go find a ship and sail to Karatur? So Fandelver is landlocked. There's no ship. There's no ocean anywhere within 200 miles of it. You've got a group of 5 players with one of them being hell-bent on finding a ship sailing 2,000 miles to the east.
Okay.
That's, I think that alone could stop a DM that's not prepared for it, could easily stop them in their tracks and just make them go, what am I supposed to do?
I
don't know how to deal with this.
No. Do you think that would make, because you just said you could picture a DM stopping at that point, so would that translate to something, kind of what I was saying about how modules can be actually more difficult to run?
Yeah, I think so. I think modules could be a touch more difficult to run, but that's only if the DM doesn't know the word no. And that's probably one of the biggest things that DMs need to know, as in KNOW. It is okay to tell a player no, they can't do that.
Yeah.
That no, you can't go 200 miles west to find a ship to sail 2,000 miles east. Not doing that right now. Or yeah, you can do that, but these other 4 people, they want to go here. They want to do this. I can't, I'm not going to split my time between the two of, between you doing this by yourself and me trying to do this for these 4 people. And then of course you'll get, oh, well, you just don't want to have player agency. No, that's not it. That's It's just I don't want my attention detracted between this group and you. So,
It's
sorry.
a balancing. It's a balancing act
Yeah,
between when to step up and be the leader of the table, and then when to back off and be the reactionary. Because you need to be both.
correct.
I
Correct. You do.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if I like jumped in the middle of that. I just my
No,
my
no, no.
experience with it was Curse of Strahd that I tried to run, and it was such a it was such an experience that it ended up changing a lot of my DMing style like pretty significantly. So we were several episodes into Curse of Strahd, and I was like, this is just the worst. Like I'm miserable. I can't. This is just the worst. And I didn't read the entire book because I'm not going to read something that thick just to like run one session of it. Like I figure like I'll read enough
Right.
to get me started, and then I'll go through it as I go. And both of those are a mistake, and there was just no winning. And then I stumbled across that Matt Colville video. Do you watch his videos at all?
On occasion, on very rare occasion, I'm familiar with him. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, he said something I greatly disagreed with, so I tuned out of his channel for quite some time, but I happened to stumble across one video that I did end up liking, that specific one, and he talked about module length. You know, you even said yourself when you first started DMing, you were preparing whole modules, but was that in the 80s? And correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't modules back then like pamphlets, basically?
They were tiny. Yeah. I mean, and that's how I was. Yeah. That's exactly what I was doing. Was I was creating module. I mean, I would take existing modules, and they were pamphlets. I mean, at most, you might get a few of them that are like 50 plus pages, but for the most part, they were like 30 pages, 36
Oh,
pages,
gee.
and it was so super easy to read through it and adapt to memory what was going to take place in it and run it for your players. I think really one of the biggest challenges we had was when a player, and I had a couple of them that would do this, would go out and buy it themselves and read it and know, everything that was going to happen in it.
Oh, yeah.
So, it was like, oh, wait, how did you know that there was a chest hidden behind that tapestry?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Do you think that was more of an issue in the early days than in early adventures that were more dungeon crawl in focus? Because, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but modern adventures are nowhere near as like map centric dungeon crawly as older adventures were.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the older adventures were very map centric. I don't know that really modern ones. I'm currently right now running a few folks through the Vecna Eve of Ruin, and each one does have its own map. I don't.
I guess maybe it doesn't matter if because like my experience with Strahd, it limited as my experience is that it was very like there was a map and then they could wander anywhere they wanted to, and when they wandered into a certain area,
Yeah.
things would happen a certain way. But it's not like
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah,
yeah.
so okay, yeah, so the original modules were very linear. They were very A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D, D leads to the final boss. Um, and really the only back and forth you had was go into the dungeon. Encumbrance was a thing, so you've got so much stuff that you've just found. Now you're two weighted down, so you could either leave it in a corner of the dungeon and cross your fingers that a monster didn't run across it and take it, or we'll just go back to town and rest for the night and then go back into the dungeon the next morning. That was really the choices that you had, and otherwise it was like I said, it was go from point A to B to C to the final boss. Today's adventures, I see what you're saying. Today's adventures are very open.
Well, and specifically the reading ahead part, because what I'm also thinking is like, so I say I had someone who bought Curse of Strahd and read ahead. Well, in an older module, they'd read ahead and they'd know this monster is in this room, this chest is in this location.
Right.
That was everything. But in Strahd, if they read ahead, all they would know is, oh, there's hags in that windmill, of which, if you've ever seen anyone play that game, the instant anyone comes up upon the windmill, they're like, huh, so creepy old ladies in a windmill. They're immediately suspicious. It's not a big spoiler. So that's what I meant when I was wondering if reading ahead was a lot more of a deal breaker in older adventures versus newer ones.
Oh. No, I don't think it was at all. In fact, I think that when I think back on the older adventures, I think it was incredibly easy to just buy one, rip the cellophane off of it, have never read through any of it, maybe just thumb through it to look at the pictures and maybe read 2 or 3 paragraphs, immediately sit down and start running it. I think by today's comparison, the older modules. Now, that's not to say that there weren't some that were very big and complex, but for the most part, yeah, you could easily sit down and just open it up and start running it. They weren't much of a challenge. They really weren't. I mean, as a DM, from a DM point of view, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because the theme of the video, the Matt Colville video that I cite that I love so much was, and it was something that I was already feeling inside. He just kind of sort of verbally gave me permission to feel this way, but that having a book this thick be your module that's designed to go from like level 1 to level 10 and be this whole big long thing. I mean, 3 months in, we were all kind of bored and done with it anyways. So the whole argument in the video is that modules should not be that. Like one or two, like once in a while is okay, but in general, the adventures that are being published now are these big, long, epic adventures, and they shouldn't be. They need to be those shorter little modules. Have you heard that sentiment at all?
I mean, just in our regular banter around the table, but I do agree with it. I think that modules, I think that WotC, Wizards of the Coast, I think that they could have a gold mine on their hands, and I think they've already got the platform to do it. But once a month, a small adventure. Through D&D Beyond specifically, that I think could wrangle in a lot of people to the digital content. Look at Prisoner 13, for example, was a small little one-shot adventure that they released for the opening, or just before Spelljammer came out. The Vecna Nest of the Eldritch Eye for Vecna Eve of Ruin. You know, that's another miniature adventure that they came out with. And I think if they did something like that, not specifically for a book, small adventure, I think they would see a lot of people flocking to stuff like that. I am a big fan of small, bite-sized adventures. Not necessarily one-shots, but something that play in 2 sessions,
2 to 3
8-hour
sessions,
yeah, 2 to 3 sessions that would take you maybe 16 hours total if you really wanted to put it out that long. I think that a lot of people would get a kick out of that. But too, I mean, something that you could take your existing characters from module to module to module if you so wanted. Create something for 4 to 5 total characters of levels 5 to 6. Create up 3 or 4 of them, and my gosh, don't have anybody actually gain a level in that. So that way you can have 3 adventures with nobody gaining a level. So here's a question I have for you.
Oh, okay.
In everything that you have seen with modern gaming, with modern D&D, feel that players, and this actually goes for the chat too, I'd be curious to see somebody chime in on that. Do you think that players, when they sit down, that they expect to gain a level every session? Do you think that they would be okay with playing for 4 or 5 hours and not gaining a level, but just having fun playing?
I'm going to sit here and read and maybe give people a response. I have thoughts. I never run out of thoughts. That's part of my problem, actually. I have far too many. Not everyone wants to hear them all, too. It's 30 some odd years old, and I still haven't actually learned to not speak the thoughts. And I do want to. Galaxy Fox mentioned about DMing. I think for the first time, she mentioned it being excited and afraid of letting people down. I feel you there. In fact, that comment makes me think of another thing that I had only intended for this to be like 2 hours max. I mean, I don't have anywhere to be. I'm assuming you do, but I'm happy to keep chatting until 9 p.m. If you're okay with it, just let me know. Cause it has been a little over an hour now, but, so big wishes of good luck to Galaxy Fox. Definitely want to see you do well as a DM. I always want to see people do well as a DM, especially if they enjoy it. I genuinely feel like DMing is there's TTRPGs and then there's DMing. It's almost like there's two different hobbies that are running side by side with each other. That's what I meant earlier about DMing is a craft, is a hobby. Like how if you're a woodworker, you get good at woodworking. I feel like DMing is like that. It's something you actually strive to continuously get better at. It's not passive. Let's see, no shit on the design team at Wizards, but I love the idea of older zines. 30 pages sound perfect. So it sounds like there's people who you agreed with me. Galaxy mentioned it. It sounds like we're not crazy for wanting smaller adventures.
Well, no, and there's a company out there called Goodman Games that they do exactly that. They create small adventures. They take some of the old classic modules too and have updated them 5th edition, but they also create their own adventures that are about that size. I don't know that they've got newer ones out yet. I don't know. I don't keep up with Goodman Games that much. I've got a couple of their books, but I couldn't tell you like how often they turn that stuff out.
In fact, is that the Temple of Elemental Evil that I spy back there? Yep. I have that too. I got it for Christmas. I haven't read as much of it as I should, but cool.
I mean, I like the layout of it because you get the original adventure as it originally appeared, plus the 5th edition conversion of it, plus a lot of what I love about it specifically is the behind the scenes information that they give you about it. It's cool. After
Christmas, I was sitting down and I was reading the pages in the beginning where people were talking about their experiences with the game, and that was fun. So, but not to derail too far, you had asked a question and I was kind of seeing if people in chat would chime in about it. So just for my ADHD brain, repeat that question one more time for me.
I don't remember the question.
Good. Then I'm not the only one. That makes me feel so much better. We were talking about module and length of modules, and you had asked something about
players, modern players. Come on, somebody in the chat. I know y'all are paying attention.
Right? Well, there's like you ask a question in the chat and you have to like wait and entertain yourself for 45 seconds or a minute before the responses start coming in, and by then you're on to something else. This is, by the way, this is it's not the Travelers, it's Logan Pass. It's a local whiskey. What do you have?
This is empty. But it was actually just a generic root beer.
Oh. Have you tried the because I know you got a bunch of crown bags over there. Do you have the blackberry crown? Have you tried that?
Not yet, but it's arriving.
It is so good.
It's actually, it's in transit to me.
It's so good.
I had to order it online, so it's in transit.
So I shouldn't brag about the fact that we're on our 4th bottle. Not that we've actually gone through all 4 of them, but we stocked up. Yeah, no, shop.
I can't find them.
We have a shop across the street, and we just kind of go in every so often, and we'll get a little bit of this and a little bit of that so that we have it. What we did that was really, really, really good, Fresca is a carbonated soda. Fresca has a citrus flavor, and we took the blackberry, about like a quarter blackberry, and then the rest of a pint glass of that citrus fresca. It's so good. It comes out like it's like a blackberry lemonade type flavor. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's really good. Okay, so people are talking about putting things up in the Discord for help, and Rivers points out that Temple of Elemental Evil was actually a big module, which if the Goodman Games books are anything to go off of, holy crap, those suckers are this big and there's 2 of them. I used my Goodman Games books to help flatten my battle mat. That's how big they are.
Huge.
They're very huge, like full of neat stuff, but very huge. But I'm gosh, it's gonna bug me now. I want to go back to that question, because this whole time you haven't really asked me any questions, and you asked me one and I feel determined to answer it if I could just remember what the question was. It was something about new players. We were talking about modules. Somebody in chat let us.
I'm old. I'm old, so I can. That's my excuse for forgetting it already.
Well, I feel much better. I feel like I was being rude because I forgot it, but you're the one who asked, and you also forgot it. So that just makes me feel a lot better. Well, let's see. What else did I have? I had a couple of things kind of notated, but I took notes really, really fast. Because we were talking about the experience with Strahd. I will say that after watching that video, combined with my experience after Curse of Strahd, it absolutely changed my games.
I remembered the question.
Oh, good. What was it?
Do you think that new players expect to gain a level at every session?
So we're playing DC20 right now at both tables, although the one may not be forever. And because the beta only goes to level 2, I find myself in this situation where gaining a level every session is like not even an option. So I have that in the back of my mind when it comes to that. Now, I am one of those weird people, and maybe this went away, but a couple of years ago, let's say 5-ish years ago, something, I don't know, when I very first started on watching stuff on YouTube, it was huge to be a milestone instead of XP. It was like all the rage. Milestone is so much better. You should do milestone, and I refused. I never did milestone. I absolutely refused because of 2 reasons. One, I'd go 6 sessions without leveling anybody because I'd forget about it. So having XP and having to actually divvy out XP per monster that they killed at minimum kept me honest. It kept the ball moving forward. Also, it was nice for the players because they felt like everything they did amounted to something. Even if it was only a little bit, it still amounted to something. So my personal experience is that I don't expect them to level every session, especially after like level 2 or 3. Level 1 usually goes quick. Level 2 usually goes quick. After that, it's anyone's guess because it starts getting slower and slower and slower. But because of milestone, I won't say that I think that new players expect it, and new players can chime in. I am not a player, so I wouldn't know, but I certainly don't expect it, and I don't know any new players who did expect it. There seems to be this universal understanding, despite playing with at least 1 or 2 people who weren't even gamers at all, and yet they still kind of understood this thing that it would not be every session. The couple of people that I had, one had played like Legend of Zelda and that was it. And the other one had not played any video games ever. Had never played any tabletop game ever. In fact, this lady was the kind of lady that when she walked up to me and she said, she had like asked a couple questions. I'm like, oh, it's D&D. This is what it does. She was one of those people where you talk to them and you're like, oh yeah, no, they're not a gamer. Not even remotely attached. And she's like, well,
they
can I
don't
come?
even play Tetris on their phone. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. That was not this lady whatsoever. And she was an older lady as well. Not like, let's say 40s, 50s maybe, but like just not someone I would have expected. Like, because usually by that time in their life, I feel like if they haven't had exposure to it, like they've already got their hobbies, they've already got their lifestyle, they've already got their things that they do. They don't tend to jump into new things, at least not anyone that I've met. And I'm not trying to be rude or anything. That's just been my experience, is that I tend to see that like younger people tend to like jump off the deep end into things, and people who are in their 40s and 50s have kind of settled a little bit. They might have a big life change that happens here or there, but they tend to have this thing, like, I go do this, here's my hobby, here's my things I do. But she just was like, hey, can I play with you guys? And I was like, sure. Do you have any idea what you're about to jump into? And she showed up, and she was the one I was telling you about, with the standing on the bookcase with the whip and everything. And I was like, dang, I had no idea. Color me surprised. But even she, with no video game experience, no gaming experience at all, even she was like, when I said they were level 2, she was like, okay. And she just understood it as this thing that the DM decrees. She had no expectation because she had nothing to start from at all.
Right.
So other people who are new players can experience that. But I tell you what, I was actually surprised how much fun we are having with DC 20 without leveling. I would have thought that by now they would have been frustrated with still being level 1. I did say go ahead and level 2. You need to at least level 2, because that's all I have. I mean, I could wing it, but essentially it only goes up to level 2. And I would have thought that people would have been more frustrated. And maybe it's because it's a new system. We've only had a couple of combats. Maybe they're still so wrapped up in learning the mechanics that they're not focused on, oh my gosh, we are 4 sessions in and we're still level 1. What me and my sister are doing for Stitch Ventures, which I thought about borrowing. Now, Stitch Ventures is just, it's not really a TTRPG. There's no mechanic, no book, there's nothing like that. But the system we came up with, I'm thinking about borrowing and sticking into a TTRPG, which is at level 1, you need to complete 2 quests and then you're level 2. When you're, level 1 and 2 gets odd, but basically you need as many quests as your level -1. So to level from 3 to 4, you need to complete 2 quests. To level from 4 to 5, you need to complete 3 quests. To level from 5 to 6, you need to complete. So basically you have to do the same number of quests plus 1 every single time to level. And part of me was thinking about actually converting to milestone and using that method. Now
I can see it, yeah.
I saw the reaction when I mentioned milestone, so I kind of want to hear more about that.
So I'm not a fan of milestone. I'm a bigger fan of experience. And so, like right now I'm running my players through the Vecna Eve of Ruin. But what I'm finding in that too is, and of course we started off at level 1 and they're currently level 13. The adventure itself, where it starts, you start off at level 10, and at the end of every single chapter, that's a milestone and you automatically gain a level. But what I have discovered, by the time they started this adventure where the book begins, they were level 10. They are currently level 13, and they are exactly 3 chapters into the book. And really what I have found is that the monsters inside, when you look at the amount of experience that each monster will grant as they defeat it, that adds up to what they would have needed to get to the next level. So that is kind of interesting insight that I haven't noticed before in other adventures. But I also haven't specifically been paying attention to it. I don't know what drove me to pay attention to it this go around. But yeah, I'm not a fan of milestone. I much prefer experience for monsters is in the monster manual for a reason. And I'm going to use that because, I guess I'm old and that's what I've always done. Well,
correct me if I'm wrong, but you used to get experience per gold piece too, right? Like in earlier editions D&D, was that a thing? So how much treasure you collected was legitimately tied to your progression?
I don't recall that specifically. If it was, it wasn't anything that I paid that close attention to.
I think I remember watching that in like a video or something.
It's possible. That it sounds vaguely familiar, but I'll be honest. It's been a long time since I've delved into those past editions that heavy.
Okay. So, you know what that makes me think of? That comment. That makes me think of what you mentioned way at the beginning of this chat about exposure to the old stuff versus the new stuff. So you've been around for many editions of D&D, and to what you said earlier about how not all the new DMs or players have been exposed to the previous editions. Do you, as someone who has experience with those editions, but you're still playing the new edition, what about that part of it? Like, you have people that have that exposure, but they're still not playing the old editions, or are they?
Yeah, they kind of are. So my table is somewhat of a bastardization of Dungeons and Dragons. The core of what we play is, this point, it is more fifth edition than anything else. But I use a lot of mechanics and the basic rules of second edition. I use a lot of third edition stuff. I liked when they transitioned over to the D20 system. I think that makes rolls a lot easier to keep up with, and players just kind of grasp that concept a little bit better. I like some of the mechanics that popped up in fourth edition, specifically, and I've said this before too. Monsters, their conditions, like they get bloodied.
Oh
And
yeah.
that just kind of gives the players kind of this theater of the mind, but visual representation of how close they are to actually killing this monster. Oh well, yeah, you've done 200 points to it, but it doesn't. It's there's nothing. It just doesn't appear to be anything different than when you first attacked it. Versus, yeah, you've done 200 points to it. This thing is gushing blood all over the place.
Yeah.
We're about to kill it. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah.
So I mean, I like that mechanic of fourth edition a lot. Edition, I mean, listen, even as an older DM of this game, fifth edition is very simple, and in terms of, it's going to sound really weird, it's simple in terms of complexity. I find that I don't really have to explain a whole lot to a newer player about how fifth edition works. If I were to break out, my old AD&D book
I like how
and
that
start
was
flipping
just,
through this.
you didn't even have to go to a shelf or anything. You literally just reached down and it was right there. That
That's what being an experienced DM will let you do. You can pull out anything from the floor. No, this was actually, I was in a live stream a couple of nights ago, and I just haven't put it back on the shelf yet. It was right here next to the camera.
Oh, that's true.
Because
You've
I was
been
also
busy.
showing this off. God, I know.
Makes
But
me feel
no, I mean,
bad
there's
having you here, but like I'm glad you're here.
it's, I get a kick out of it. But there's information in that book that, gosh, if I were to sit down, I mean, there's hardly any artwork in that book. It's just walls of text. And, if you sit down with it and try to explain that to somebody, it's like, oh gosh, guys, I'm not going to explain this to you here. Just take this book and read it. Come back to me in a year and let me know that you've read it, and then we'll start going from there. That's what second edition kind of was. It's not that it was difficult. For me, it wasn't difficult, and for the players, it wasn't difficult. It's just
Presentation, maybe.
presentation is totally different back then as versus today, and I think that's something that fifth edition has done okay. I mean, it's a different audience that's playing it today than it was, back in the 80s
True.
and 90s. But and while I think I think players and DMs today, I think they're all crafty enough. I think they're all smart enough. If somebody were to just hand them second edition stuff and say, this is what you got to play from now on, I think that they could do it easily. It's not a, what's the right word? It's not an intimidating set of books, but it is nuanced. I think that's the right word for it. It is nuanced.
Nuanced. Okay. I thought you were gonna I thought you were going somewhere else with that. I thought you were gonna say that it looks intimidating. It's not intimidating, but it looks intimidating because but nuanced.
I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, nuanced in the in the fact that you kind of almost have to want to jump into it. Don't know, alluding back to what we were saying earlier, like Casablanca, classic movie, but I don't know too many 16-year-olds to 25-year-olds that have ever seen it, let alone heard of it. That's what I mean by nuanced. It's you have to want to seek that movie out. You have to want to watch it or to watch it. It's not something that you're just going to happen to run across, on vision or a streaming platform. Netflix is not going to recommend it.
Yeah.
HBO Max is not going to recommend it.
Yeah.
You have to seek it out to watch it, and that's what I mean by nuanced. It's something you have to seek out.
People that I know personally would respond to that by saying that today's youth has the attention span of a goldfish, and it's all technology's fault. And I can't say that they're 100% wrong. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I do think that there's an attention span issue, but anyways, I saw, was it Galaxy? I have a question. Is Eve of Ruin any good? Mr. Game Masters.
You want my honest opinion? No, I don't like it. I ended up doing a complete and total rewrite of it and a complete fix of it. Almost an hour-long video or 39-minute video or 45-minute video or something like that, where I detailed out exactly what I was going to do to fix the adventure for my table. And I was not a fan I wasn't a fan of it, of how they presented. I think they had so many missed opportunities.
Yeah, that was the that's why I was giggling, was because of that video. Yeah. So here's something. In fact, I'm going to actually directly pull this up from my notes because I think I wrote it better in my notes. Uh-oh. My husband found out that they sell Hexclad at Costco. Boy, that does not bode well for our budget. He loves those bands way too much. So, I kind of have like multiple thoughts swimming around and they're kind of connecting together. So I often hear, mainly in comment sections, right? I often hear people saying that XYZ TTRPG is, quote, good or, quote, bad or a mess of a system. And what do you think about those definitive statements? And what can make a subjective hobby like an experience at a table or a TTRPG, which varies from table to table, what can make a subjective hobby of play be objectively judged? And your comment about Eve of Ruin is what made me think of that. Like how, because of how much we homebrew, how much every table is different, how much it varies from person to person, what is it that gets us to say all together, like multiple people saying the XYZ is bad or XYZ is good?
And that is a tough one to answer, but I'll take a stab at it. I think that to a degree, good, bad, that is subjective.
Sorry, that's my phone. So sorry, pulling up my notes.
No worries. But I think that could Eve of Ruin be run as it is, from the book, open it up, read it, run it, and everybody have fun. I think that is a possibility. Yes. Why I specifically didn't care for it, and this is where we jump into the realm of subjective or not, why I specifically didn't like it is looking at past books that they put out for 5th edition where they teased these black obelisks. At the end of Phandelver and Below, Eve of Ruin, they made a major connection that Vecna was tethered to these black obelisks. But there was no payoff in Eve of Ruin with that. They never even, the word black obelisk, the word obelisk was never even in Eve of Ruin. You've got these ancient artifacts, the hand of Vecna, the eye of Vecna. Again, those are nowhere to be found in Eve of Ruin. Vecna himself, in all of WotC's marketing, they stated that Vecna was this big bad evil god that had the threat of showing up at any time. And he only shows up on the last page, and you have a 2-paragraph or a 4-sentence paragraph that describes what he's doing. He's completely ignoring the characters unless they flat out attack him. Otherwise, you could get married in front of him and he would not care, according to the adventure.
Is it... are they trying to sell the idea that he thinks he's so powerful that he doesn't care? Is that the...
I kind of think that's what it is. That's not specifically spelled out, but I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think that's kind of what they were going for, but they don't specifically spell that out. He is, I think the wording is, and I'm slightly paraphrasing, but he is so wrapped up in performing his ritual of unmaking that he's not paying any attention to the characters unless they directly attack him.
So to summarize, really, even though we're talking about a hobby that is very subjective, there are certain things that we can kind of measure or grasp a hold of. And like, for example, one of those might be setup and payoff, because you can make the same argument for a movie. Movies are very subjective.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I love
absolutely.
Movies that people hate, but I love them. But then you hear in the movie review industry in particular, I feel like you hear payoff, setup and payoff a lot.
Right.
So that kind of makes me wonder. So do you follow Acquisitions Incorporated? Are you familiar with them at all?
Familiar, but I don't follow it. I mean, I'm familiar.
Okay. Well, so you at least know what it is. So I'm a big fan. So until they went Cyberpunk, I haven't followed that, but for the most part, I'm a big fan. Despite everything else, I still loved the Ack Inc. shows, and I still regularly watch. Like, as soon as they were posted, I would go watch them, and I routinely go back through and watch all the old stuff for various episodes, just all as background noise, whatever. The Kickstarter that they did in the last sort of season that they did was entirely centered around the obelisks. And I don't think this is actually what they did, but this is what made me, when I heard your comment, this is what I thought of that thing. And we see it in like the MCU, and we see it in a lot of other franchises and in gaming franchises. You see this a lot where there's not just the game now or the original form of media that you were consuming originally. There's now the game and the books. You know, Scott Cawthon did that with FNAF. And then after he did it, a zillion other people, Bendy and the Ink Machine did it, and Hello Neighbor did it, and like all these other people did it. You've got MCU, where you had the movies. Well, now you have the movies and the TV shows. And if you don't watch the TV show, you come back to the movie and, it turns out you missed all that stuff. So I don't think that Ack Inc. deliberately did anything like that with the obelisks, but I do find it interesting that they had this whole season essentially revolving around the obelisk with this big old payoff type climactic event at the end, and then in Eve of Ruin, all of a sudden there's no black obelisks. I don't think it was meant this way, but it almost has that feeling of it not seeing the show between the movies. What do you think about that concept in general? And also, what do you think about the potential with Critical Role being what they were and other people taking off after them and Ack Inc.? What do you think about that in the TTRPG industry of like having a canon that needs to be followed?
I like the concept of a canon, just because it's like nerd culture, you know, like Star Wars, you know, it has its own canon, and that's part of what is ticking a lot of people off about the Disney stuff is the Star Wars the Disney-fied Star Wars, that it's breaking canon. And it's when you establish something as canon, you are more or less paying homage to the fans. You're rewarding the fans for sticking with that IP for so long, and when you come along and you don't give the proper payoff, well, I mean, that's cause fans to leave. That said, though, I can only cross my fingers and hope that, spoilers everybody, end of Eve of Ruin, if you defeat Vecna, he gets cast down to Hawk, and they've established that Greyhawk is going to be the main land that the new 2024 edition is all based on around. So I can only hope that maybe they didn't include the obelisks in Eve of Ruin specifically because they plan to use that as a bridge between editions, and that we'll see some new adventure in 2024 version of the Player's Handbook and DMG. Maybe it comes out in 2025 that Vecna is in it and somehow the obelisks are there. Again, I rewrote the adventure to include the obelisks in my version, but I would still like to see an official canonized explanation from Wizards of the Coast as to what exactly he was doing with those obelisks and why.
The significance. Okay.
Yeah. Why even bring all that stuff up if you weren't going to do anything with it? It just doesn't make sense.
So you actually like having a sort of official canon. So yeah. What do you think about the idea of that canon taking place over different mediums? So like, let's say that the answer that you were looking for was in that Ack Inc. season. Like, if that was the case, and if that's how they did that, right, how would you feel about that?
So I guess I can go kind of both ways on it. From a marketing standpoint, I think it's brilliant. And, I've been in marketing by trade, in the real world. It's kind of part of what my job is. But so from that point of view, I can really appreciate it. From a greed point of view, like it very much, because at that point it forces me to, if I wanted to stay on the up and up with Star Wars, for example, I would have to get a Disney Plus subscription. I would have to subscribe to the comic books and read all the comic books. I would have to read every book out there. There are people out there that are happy to do that. I'm not one of them because I just don't have that kind of money. But, and I realized, these shows are showing up on YouTube and not the, Disney stuff, but, the live play games. And that doesn't cost anything to watch, but at a certain point too.
It's a time investment though.
It is a time investment.
You got to choose to sit down and watch that episode of Ack Inc. instead of your favorite show, audiobook, whatever.
Right. Or elect to, I'm sorry, Tori, I can't, I couldn't join you on a live stream tonight because I've got to go watch this other video that just came out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's, there is that. That's why I'm kind of go both ways with it. I guess honestly, it really depends on what the subject is. If
let's say it was TTRPG specifically, which is a medium that is not traditionally so Star Wars exists as a movie. Right. So bouncing from a movie to a show is like, the subscription part, bleh, but at least in forms of media, you're not jumping too hard. And the expanded universe was around for many, 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 many years. So even from movie to book. But what about TTRPGs?
So I think the only way that I'd be really thrilled with it if they did it that way would be if they came out, for example, with a mini module. Mm, Or, and this will be a big shocker because I don't think Wizards would ever do this, it's a book of lore and only lore. Give us
Mm.
a book that's, 10 pages of lore and 200 pages of adventure. Just give me some lore. I'm a lore fanatic. I love
Mm.
lore.
Mr.
And,
X?
I,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just, I just I like to know what's going on in their version of the world because, like I said, my version of what me and my players play is mostly homebrew, but I steal a lot of information from canon because my players are familiar with canon. Most people that play D&D are going to know what the main books are mostly about.
Hmm.
If we have a new player, if we have a longtime player that invites two new people into the group, there's a good chance that they already know who Vecna is. Especially if they're involved in D&D at all. If I were to
Okay.
create up a lich or an undead dragon or a big bad evil guy, they're not going to know that person from a hill of beans.
I would say
They have no clue who that is.
that's been my experience though. Like all the new players that I've had, they would have no idea who Vecna was. And I don't know if that's because these people are coming from outside the D&D scape or
And that's possible. Yeah.
yeah, that's actually overwhelmingly been my experience. And I'm with you on the lore stuff. So I threw it out there kind of as a joke, but now I need to know, like, do you watch Mr. X? Like, do you follow well, if you like lore and if you like D&D lore, that book that you're asking for, his entire channel, well, not his entire channel, but the recent end of his channel, at least the last 5 years or so, is basically that book, subject by subject.
Gotcha.
It's in his whole thing. In fact, it was because of him that I even found out about DC-20 in the first place, because he did an ad for it in one of his videos. But yeah, all of his stuff is all lore, and all of his stuff goes through multiple editions of D&D. So he goes back through all of the old, like the AD&D books, the original D&D books, he goes all the way back through the various extra books that were all written, and he compiles together these, and then he gets artwork, and puts the two of them together, and I love it. So if you love lore, definitely. And anyone in chat, anybody, I know I've been kind of ignoring chat, I'm so sorry. I blame this guy. He's really engaging to talk to. So but yes, check out Mr. X if you like lore, seriously. Also,
We'll definitely do that. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't know what this says about me, but like, I am genuinely surprised to hear you say that you actually like having a canyon. I did not think you were going to respond with that. I genuinely thought that you're going to be like, I don't want there to be a canon. Every table is unique. I want to write my own stuff. I've heard people, there's a guy who does Critical Role stuff, and then he did a whole video on why he hates Forgotten Realms as a setting. And his whole argument was that there's too much lore and there's no room for DMs. There's no room for creativity. What would you say to that argument?
I disagree. I disagree completely. Forgotten Realms I remember buying the box set, got it from Toys R Us of all places, and that was an eye-opening experience for me, getting into that setting. And I also got into it at a point where the books we had 2 30-page books, and that's all the setting that we had for it. Got exposed to new books as they were coming out that expanded that history of the Forgotten Realms and the lore of it. But at the same time, I was also simultaneously creating my own homebrew world that was heavily influenced by Forgotten Realms. I think that having something that's canon, sure, fine, yeah, every table deserves to have its own world. Every table can be, it can be different, and free to create whatever they want. That's fine. No, I have no issues with that. But I think that by having Forgotten Realms out there, having canon, having all of that rich history, you can pull bits and pieces of it, create your own homebrew. If you were to toss a bunch of players and a DM into only running a game with the information that's out there specific to Forgotten Realms, with no homebrew in it whatsoever, I don't think that that would necessarily be a bad thing either, because now, for one, you're going to have the mind of a genius to be able to keep that all in the forefront. I couldn't do it. That's why I ultimately came up with my own homebrew stuff, because as stuff came out, it's just you got inundated with information. But to dislike the setting because there's too much history and too much lore, I'm not. Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see eye to eye with that argument.
I'm in agreement with you on that one, but I just, what you were saying made me think of that. Now, quickly, before I mention the Mr. Rex a bit, you were starting to say something. Do you remember what that was?
No, it was nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. It was just going to be just a stupid little joke. But yeah, it's.
I mean, I like jokes. I like jokes.
I mean, it's not anything.
All right. Well, I wanted to circle back just in case you were like, I was going to say something. So then continuing on with that, the next thing I have written down, what about Ed Greenwood? So I can't put my finger on specific examples, but I know that I got like a vibe or a feeling, or I'm pretty sure they exist. People who are like, it's not Forgotten Realms anymore because Ed Greenwood isn't writing it. They're if it's not the original person, then it's not the same thing anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's another one that I kind of go both ways on. One, yes, he created it. To an extent, I can certainly see where somebody would say it's really not Forgotten Realms what Wizards of the Coast has done with it, because Ed Greenwood is not involved in it. Now, I don't know if in the transition or the selling of the IP of TSR to Wizards of the Coast, if there was any contract in which he got money as a result of that sale. I don't know. But from a legal standpoint, Wizards of the Coast purchased the intellectual property, and from a legal standpoint, that gives them full authority to run with that setting and do however it is they see fit. Some folks may not like it. Again, I'll liken that to the same thing that Disney has done with Star Wars. They purchased the intellectual property from George Lucas for an ungodly amount of money. A lot of people don't like the direction that they have taken it, but that's their choice to do. Now, I will say this: if it's ultimately something that the players don't like and we shun it, the bed they made, and that, I think, is what speaks volumes. I don't like that they haven't really developed Forgotten Realms since. I'm trying to think of really the last lore pushing bit of material, even going back to 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition. I can't think of anything outstanding.
Wouldn't you describe Eve of Ruin as Eve of Ruin in and of itself, because it deals with a god character and these other characters? Is that not like lore, or because it's a module we don't really count it?
Yes, I think at a level, I guess it is kind of lore in the grand scheme of things, but it's also kind of a watered down, watered lore.
Like they're afraid to commit to something almost.
Yeah. And it's something that at the end of the adventure, nothing at all has really changed in any of the worlds that you dip your toes in throughout the adventure. So, by the end of Eve of Ruin, assuming that the players have won the day, of it, nothing in Forgotten Realms changes. Nothing in Eberron changes. Nothing in Greyhawk changes other than Vecna being cast down to it. Nothing in Spelljammer changes. Nothing in any of the other settings that are in that book. Nothing changes. Nothing in Pandemonium changes. So it's like
It's like a filler episode where it doesn't matter if you caught it or
kind of,
not.
yeah, kind of. I mean, the way I look at lore is if I'm sitting down as a scholar and I'm reading a book about the history of something, um, what is this adventure? What is it doing to add to the history of that setting? Bruin didn't really add any history to it. I mean,
That's true.
well, to that extent, I mean, I guess yes, on a technical level, it does touch lore, but and it doesn't at the same time.
That's interesting because when I think of my knowledge of Forgotten Realms lore extends entirely from Mr. X, the channel I mentioned earlier, because he's gone through the work of actually amalgamating everything together from all of these different editions. But I thinking back on it, he most of the times when he mentions what book it comes from, he'll say something like, actually in original D&D, blah 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 blah, or now the majority of this comes from it was not Planescape, that's not the right word, but there's a book in 3rd edition that was like all about the planes of his existence. Like most of the stuff that he draws from all comes from those books. It almost feels like, even though he is, because part of what his motto, tagline, it didn't start this way but it ended up turning it into it, was what the 5th edition book doesn't tell you, what the 5th edition monster manual doesn't tell you about, and then insert a monster here. Now he does planes, gods, monster, he does all kinds of stuff, but I think that the rhythm that he started to develop was exactly that, what the 5th edition monster manual doesn't tell you about insert monster here. And he starts by reading the 5th edition monster manual, and then the whole rest of the video is, now what the monster manual doesn't tell you is, and he goes back to all of these older books. So I guess that kind of ties into what you were saying about how we don't really see that in the later editions. Do you think it's because they're afraid to commit? Do you think it's because they're trying to leave it open for DMs to insert their own stuff, almost like they heard that guy's complaints?
I think there's a couple of different views out there. I have seen some comments not in your specific chat, but in other chats. Even in my own Discord, I've had some comments made that they think that part of the reason that WotC doesn't do that is that they just don't have the talent that can develop that kind of lore. That could be part of it. I don't know. But I think that you saying, are they afraid to have that commitment, that they would rather it be an open source for players and DMs to develop on their own? I think that honestly really hits closer to what the reasoning behind it is. Which, I mean, okay, on one hand, I like that they're giving me the ability to create it up myself, but on the other hand, I prefer to have a commonality between and what I know. That when you sit down at my table and we look at Red Dragon, yes, even though some of the knowledge may be considered meta knowledge, information that's outside of what's specifically in the game, both at this point have an understanding of where red dragons come from, where cloud giants come from, and who the Allfather is with giants. Whereas if I just create something up because they failed to provide to me, lore, then you're going to have zero clue as to how things happen in my world. At least with lore out there or an established canon, we have some kind of familiar common ground.
Red dragon equals evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Something real basic
You
there.
know,
Red dragon equals evil. But then again, that's something that's really kind of taken for granted maybe sometimes.
well, and from what I've understood, that they're going to be changing that up in fifth edition. I saw, I don't know, a video or something that they put out a couple of days ago that said that they're completely redoing all the dragons. That they want to have the dragons be very unique to each other,
I thought they
and
already
each
were.
one is. I thought they already were too, so I don't know exactly what that means, but we'll find out, I guess, in 2025 when that monster manual comes out. Um, but yeah, I mean that's what they're saying, that they're going to try to streamline something like that and get a bit more unique. But I'm all for that. That's fine.
Yeah,
Let's
okay.
let's have some fun canon and fun lore that, and where we can all have some common ground to reference.
Through a lot of the questions that I've asked and through a lot of the conversation, you've ended up seeing both sides, which I appreciate, actually. Some others may rail against that and refer to that as being indecisive. I've gotten that thrown at me. But actually, I have a level of appreciation for at least acknowledging or understanding the other side's point of view and where they come from. The guy I mentioned earlier, I wish I could remember his name. I don't agree with him that the Forgotten Realms is too lore heavy and problematic as a setting. I don't agree with that at all. But I kind of sort of understand why he would feel that way if he really wants a lot of room to create and to explore and stuff like that. So I just insert into the middle of all of that, like side note, I appreciate having a conversation with someone who's kind of with me and where I can kind of see this way and I can kind of see this way.
I blame high school for it. In high school, I was on the debate team, and for 3 years, that was ingrained in my mind that, okay, Brian, here's your topic. Have to argue this part of it, and then the next competition, same topic, argue the other part of it.
You had to
Or
switch
in the
sides.
same yeah, or in the same competition, here's the topic. This round, you argue this one. Next round, same topic, you argue the opposite side. And so I fully blame high school debate for that.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
and
not bad
now
though.
it's hard. Well, no, it's not. It's not. And I wonder if that's part of the philosophy behind that existing in high schools. But sometimes I admit it is a curse because, yeah, I too have been. It's been thrown at me as, well, you're just being indecisive. No, just happen to see both sides of the same coin, and it
There,
sucks.
there's a lot of nuance to things. I have a list of, I'm so behind on channel stuff. Oh my gosh. I have like a list of potential scripts, and pardon me as my cat goes wandering around my desk. But I have a list of potential scripts and topics. And one of the topics that I have, is, she's trying to eat some leftover key lime pie on my desk. Um,
Oh.
WotC and the hate. So this is a bit of a spoiler, but just on the off chance that I never get to make that this video never comes out, I can just clip this bit of this stream. But the decisiveness and WotC and hate, and I kind of even hinted at this with my earlier question about the objective and the subjective, but I get actually frustrated when I hear things like such and such system is just broken and dumb. And that's it. That's all they say. That's the whole comment. Or like, what? I'm having a hard time even pulling specific examples, but I know you know what I mean. I do get a little
Play
bit
Pathfinder instead. Yeah.
Yeah. Just the very one-sided lacking of nuance in the idea that, you know what, I get why people don't like WotC. I'm not even necessarily a big fan of WotC myself. I'm not shilling or defending them, but going around blaming them, like, first of all, them as in an entity, as in like there's hundreds of people involved, maybe a lot less now than there was before, but it's like there's always more nuance to it. And it's like being a fan of Ack Inc. With all of the vitriol aimed at WotC, it's sometimes almost lonely being a fan of Acquisitions Incorporated, because Perkins and Crawford are very heavily involved with that, obviously, and they're the lead designers. And I mean, like, I can love Ac Inc. and I can love watching those games and still be really disappointed with the company decisions and the products they're producing. Like, both things can be true at once.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I fall on that. Is I don't. I can get angry with WotC. I can get vocal with WotC. But hate, that's such a strong word. But disappointed, I think, is a stronger word than hate, as disappointed shows a degree of shame. And that's honestly how I feel about WotC. I am very disappointed in some of their business decisions. That I don't think that they're the right decisions to carry the game forward. And some of it is not necessarily from a design point of view, like the whole thing with Vecna and Eve of Ruin and the no obelisks and that kind of thing. I'm not disappointed in that. I don't hate them because of that. I think that they have some missed opportunities because of that, and I think that the book could have been better. But to get upset with them over that is that's silly in my opinion. I'm looking at my disappointment in them is it stems more from a bad business choice, bad business decision that they've made in Hasbro, for example, letting 1,100 people go, with a good majority of that being Wizards of the Coast. I think that was a bad decision, and I'm disappointed that they made that decision. That's 1,100, 1,200 people that were left jobless at Christmas. That's low. When you look at what Chris Cox got for a Christmas bonus, or what Cynthia Williams made, as a Christmas bonus, disappointing.
Yeah. Now, do you think that it's more, like you mentioned Eve of Ruin, and it's not even just Eve of Ruin, but the amalgamation of Eve of Ruin plus whatever they were upset about? I don't understand Spelljammer, but I understand that people were upset about it for some reason. And the Aragorn magic card and the AI art and the da 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 da. And then the second thing is, have you seen the Goths in Rome coverage or the video about Hasbro that they did? Because I will admit that genuinely got me thinking a little harder about where we're laying that blame. And that some things that we get all upset about and we go, oh, Hasbro this or WotC this, might actually be flippity floppity.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And two, I mean, I'll also throw in, not to delve too much into a religious element of it, but let he who has, and I'm going to butcher this saying, but let he who has no sins cast the first stone. How many gamers have floated through life making every design decision that they've ever made being the perfect decision, for their players, or any human being for that matter, floating through life. I've made mistakes. Hell, I've made more mistakes this past week than I have, than any one of these viewers that's watching has made.
Can you say that for sure, really?
Well, I mean, with a degree of confidence, I can, yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, we love you, and hugs and good vibes going your way. Air hug. I actually do that to people I know in real life. I walk up to them, I go, air hug. That's a thing.
Yeah. But no, it's some people, and hey, we're gamers. We know how to hold a grudge. And I think that that's part of it, is that some people will not let go of that grudge regardless. Fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That is your freedom of choice to make. If they have done something that's pissed you off, speak with your money. That's the key right there.
Which in
Um,
general, I think a lot of people are, which is why you talk about bad business
right.
decisions being made. I mean, you can just like we talked about, there are some objective things within the subjective hobby. I think you could say the same for wizards, where there are just some that was like, dude, I can't even defend you against this, and or
Right.
some WotC fan is sitting there like, guys, I can't even, there's definitely been
Yeah.
some bad stuff there. But I appreciate you and other channels that try to take a more objective stance and try to take a step back and separate the pieces and take a look at it. In fact, that's how I first found your channel. It was not OGL. It wasn't that far. Was it that far back? There was a video that you did where you're talking about something that was like a hot button topic at the time. This was like before the layoffs and stuff. And you just had a very like, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this. Like, here's the situation. I'm not saying yay or nay. Just be aware of the situation before you make judgment calls. And that's what made me love your channel so much in the beginning.
And that's always been kind of my flat out approach. Even when I do a book review, I don't listen. I don't care. That this new book of there's been a vocal lot of people out there really upset that got two dwarves in there that evidently are together, and one of them has a tattoo on one arm of his companion's beard, and the other one has a tattoo on their arm of his companion's beard. I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not something to get up in arms about. I don't feel. Some people were upset because they gender swapped one of the characters in Fandelver and Below. Made one of the, I think they made the blacksmith a female instead of a male. Well, honestly understand the reasoning behind it because it doesn't impact the story in any way.
But likewise, it doesn't impact the story in any way.
Right. It doesn't impact the story in any way. So really, why do I care? I mean, if I was that hell bent on no, it's not going to happen in my game, well,
Then
just change it
just
back.
change it back. Yeah. I'm 50-50 because on the one hand, I'm with you. I had the same problem when Beauty and the Beast remake came out and everyone got all up in arms about the gay representation in that film, which I thought was very minuscule, ineffective. Like there wasn't a whole lot there, guys. I don't know why you're getting all up in arms about it. I would say the same thing as far as like if it's not too in your face, if it's not, if it's just like doesn't impact the story, if it's, okay, fine, change the character. But I can also see a side of the coin where people are taking that and adding it into, but there's also this other thing, and then there's also this other thing that got changed, and then there's also this other thing, and then there's what's happening with this other franchise it's not even D&D, and then there's this other thing over here, then there's all this stuff on TikTok because they're on TikTok and Twitter and places like that, and you start taking all of that and you start like shoving it towards people, and then they just get to the point where they're like, I'm tired of it. I'm tired. So then they start getting nitpicky. Then they start seeing that picture of those two dwarves, and where I'm looking at that and I'm like, could care less. They're seeing it like a big red exclamation mark because of how much it's been. And I can see that point of view because it's like everywhere.
Yeah, you say that. Yeah, you pointing that out, and I can see that point of view as well. I mean, and that's part of the problem of me being able to see it, from both sides of the same coin, because I can see that part of it. I guess just for me personally,
is it worth getting upset about?
I guess I haven't. Yeah, I've got far too many other things in life to get upset about. Than a picture in a book. I have, I have a daughter who's about to turn 20. I have a son that just turned 16, and holy crap. Two dwarves that love each other, don't care.
That's not on the priority list right now.
Yeah, my insurance went up. I'm paying $600 for auto insurance coverage for 4 people. It went up from like $480 to just over $600. Guys, come on, seriously. don't care about two gay dwarves.
Yeah.
I have far larger things to worry about.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my view on it.
Yeah. No, and I'm with you, because I see where they're coming from, but I'm also like, I'm with you as far as like, I'm not going to get upset about that right now. And maybe I
now, I may put a pin in it, and I may pull that out in 6 months. I've discovered that, hey, the General Online can save me $300 on insurance, and now I have something less there to worry about. Now I can allow some other stuff to come in. Now, I will admit that is a possibility. Yeah.
It's one of those, maybe a better way to put it is that it gets tucked away in your data bank of knowledge. You're not going to get upset right now about two gay dwarves in the book, but again, with that accumulation, because accumulation is something that should not get disregarded. It's one thing if you do it this one time in this one book and we are like, whatever. But then when you do it with, there's the whole Aragon magic card, and then there's something about like orcs and something. I didn't follow all of that. I just saw pictures of orcs here and there. So somebody got upset about orcs, and then and then now they're attacking Lord of the Rings, and which is not even D&D. Again, with the whole, it stacks, it builds, and then people reach unhealthy boiling points, and then it kind of all comes out. In fact, I just literally skipped myself over something that I thought of when you were talking about that. Galaxy, I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. And Gauze mentioned earlier, by the way, about Ed Greenwood having his own channel, which I have actually, I'm subscribed to. I'm subscribed. I saw like a couple of videos. I don't know what this says about me, but like I couldn't keep watching the videos. I actually kind of like got bored and tuned out. I'm so sorry. But like on some of his videos, I couldn't follow, and maybe it was just poor timing on my part because I couldn't like just like sit and watch and absorb it. But like I can put on Mr. Rex and I'm like, I'm hooked. I want to hear the next sentence and the next sentence and the next sentence. And for some reason, the Greenwood videos, I just kind of like, oh, neat. And then I scroll past them. I'm sorry.
No, I get it.
Okay, so gosh, there was something else in the middle of all of that, and I can't remember for the life of me what it was. It is currently 7:30 where I'm at, so that means it's what, 8:30 for you? I mean, yeah, we've been going on for 2.5 hours, so maybe this is a good.
That's what happens.
Yeah. Well, seeing as I can't remember my I'll ask for one last thing, and then we'll call it. But if we enjoyed it enough, if you enjoyed it enough, if chat enjoyed it enough, I will maybe endeavor to do this again once in a while. Now, you and Seraphis are now doing something on the regular. Is that a thing now?
Well, I don't know that it's going to be completely on a regular. It's sort of on a regular, maybe. We did a first episode of. He's doing a podcast on his channel, just called Talking Drek, and it's from Cyberpunk. Drek meaning talking shit. So we just get on BS with each other.
Okay, good. I didn't know.
Random topics. It's random stuff. It's a place to kind of rant and rave, and he allows cussing, and it's a fun little space just to go. But I think that his plan is to have it opened up to other creators to come on as well, and just have a general chat. Kind of like what we're doing, but just open and
just maybe a little less TTRPG. Because I popped in at one point and it was all about the weather, and I was like, and it was so engaging for a bit.
We were all over the place. Yeah, we were all over the place. Yeah. So I think that's going to be fun.
Okay. Well, because I had for anyone who's following in chatter after the fact, I had reached out to Game Masters and asked if he'd be willing to do this 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, something like that. It was quite a while ago, because I that's when the idea about the technology and the individuality of tables Oh yeah, remember that topic? And right after I asked you about that, like the very next week, and it was like, oh, Game Masters is doing a live stream. Oh, Game Masters is involved in another live. Oh, that's okay. And Game Masters is in another live stream, and then there's tonight. So I feel bad about that. But
No, listen, my goal, if I had it my way, I would hope nobody from work is watching. I would quit my job in a heartbeat and just do Game Masters 24/7.
You're more dedicated than I am. I may.
Oh, that would be fun. That would just be so fun.
I don't trust. I'm not gonna lie. Trying to balance a channel and a full-time job is a legit struggle, and I have gone back and forth and back. I've thought about quitting the channel entirely. I have thought about, okay, I'll just do streams and I'll never do any of the stick videos. And then lo and behold, I'll think that, and I'll have a decision made. Like, nope, that's it. I'm just gonna not do the stick figure anymore. And then I'll wake up the next morning, check the comments, and then some person commented on like the month ago DC20 video, and they're like, oh, I can't wait to see more. And I'm like. So trying to balance.
It's cool. I mean, I'll be honest with you. The stick figure stuff is cool. I know that's got to be a pain in the ass to edit and put together, but it is really, really cool. It's very unique out there. I think with.
I mean, Yahtzee Croshaw doesn't do stick figures, but.
Oh, well, I mean, okay. So there's another YouTuber out there called the Degenerate DM, and. He's just it's a faceless channel. He does a lot of hand stuff. It's like bird's eye view down on a table and a lot of hand motion. It's all D&D, different things. Your channel reminds me a lot of his in a slightly different way, and I really like the stick figures. It's fun to watch. It's simple but complex at the same time. But I also am getting a kick out of just kind of watching the complexity of it, because I know that cannot be easy to edit and put together. I know it's time consuming.
Well, I think of Yahtzee, aka Zero Punct. Well, he's now fully rambolic. He used to be Zero Punctuation. His name is Yahtzee Croshaw. So if looking at that, or like who is it? Blaine Simple, or Pointy Hat. Or, you look at some of those guys, and what I do absolutely pales in comparison. On the reverse side of that, I don't have editors or anything. I don't know if they do, but I don't have like a team or anything. It's me, myself, and I'm also working in full-time job. But for one, I don't hate my job. I know that probably makes me a weird.
Oh yeah, no, and that's the thing. I will say this: I don't hate my job. I really like what it is that I do. Would be cool if I could just do this.
Just do this.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Well, to circle back a bit there, because of comments like what you just said, and because of like stories like what I just said about the comments, I don't really have it in my heart to give up on the stick figures entirely, just because the reception to it is so good. And but you're not wrong. It is kind of time consuming. Although I am taking steps to improve that. Like the very first DC20 video I ever did, the one with the Monopoly board and all of that, and which is more complicated than my recent ones. But if you go back and you watch them all back to back to back to back, you'll notice changes, and I'm trying to get an improved workflow. By the way, nobody mentioned it. This is fine. But I just want to take the opportunity to point out there, go back and watch that video and look at the Monopoly board, because I put Easter eggs in there. Like when I drew that, because I drew the whole Monopoly, like everything that's in there is drawn on a tablet by hand because I was terrified of copyright strikes. Oh. So I put little Easter eggs in the Monopoly board.
Yeah.
First of all, I had a real Monopoly board that I based it off of, so all the squares are actually what those squares are on a real board. But for example, the community chest, I drew the community chest with teeth and a tongue as a mimic, so stuff like that. Yeah.
Nice.
So the thing I wanted to end on, because you did do one video on it when all the hype was high, which a whole bunch of people did a video on it when hype was high, but the hype has died down for a lot of us for the most part. Although Short said he was going to do another video on it, so I'm intrigued to see what that's going to be. But DC-20. So I never touched another system because they were all like, oh yeah, that's nice, interesting, oh wow, no, yeah, that's cool, but I'm not going to go through the work and effort of putting that into my game. And I know that people say it's easy, but it is, but it's not. But what, now that the honeymoon phase is kind of, you know, the Kickstarter's over,
Sure.
a lot of the other channels aren't doing coverage of it anymore per se, except for dedicated ones. But what do you think of DC-20? Have you looked into it, tried it? Have you, because I think you back, so you probably have the beta.
Yeah, I mean, I like the system. I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't done any additional videos on it because old, and I can only retain so much information, and I have a backlog of other things that I really wanted to get to, like Dragonbane was a big one.
Okay.
And I went for, I think, a week just churning out one video every single day about Dragonbane. And that's something that I've been wanting to get done for about a year.
Oh,
And
geez.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
I have got a backlog, but, and I know what
Can I have can I have a
people,
backlog? I only have like 4 or 5 scripts planned. I need more ideas.
I even got in, so I showed this one,
Oh yeah, the
embargoes and
infamous.
stuff. Yeah, embargoes and stuff. But I got these both in. This is Symborum. This one is the World of Symborum. It's a whole lore-heavy book for 5th edition, but it's not a Wizards of the Coast 5th edition. It's a Free League from Free League Publishing. And then this one is the Throne of Thorns, which is kind of an adventure book, sort of, for a game called for a setting called the Ruins of Symborum. I don't know
Interesting.
if
So
that can come.
that's a it's 5th edition, but it's a setting book.
And it's by a third party, you know, from Free League Publishing. And I mean, I got a lot of stuff like that I want to work on and do. When I said about DC-20 specifically, for me, it's got a little too much crunch, you know, for what I, you know, for my style of play. I think it's a great system. I think that question, you look at the Kickstarter, and I mean, it was wildly successful, and I think that it's filling in a hole that has existed for a long time in the role-playing landscape. And Dungeon Coach is doing one hell of a job in developing it. He's got a great marketing campaign, you know, for it, and I mean, it wouldn't be where it's at if people weren't hungry for it. So, but for me, it just came down to a choice of not covering it because I've got so much else on my plate.
Okay. So that's
yeah, go ahead.
I would say, so that's in terms of coverage, but what about you as a DM and a player? Like outside of the channel, do you ever do that where you cover things? So like, this is what I want to cover that may or may not be what I want to play, or are they always like kind of the same thing?
Yeah, no, no, you're exactly right. So like with Dragonbane, I didn't want to do any videos on it until I had mastered that system. And so that's why it took me a year. I mean, I've had the books, well, I say a year. I mean, I think I had them since October or so of last year. But it took me that long to read them. And of course, you know, at the same time, I'm finishing up a D&D session or campaign for my players. And then, you know, come January, we hear about this Vecna Eve of Ruin book coming out, and my players are like, play that? And I'm like, but I have Dragonbane. We don't care about Dragonbane. We want to play Vecna. Okay.